Have you ever found yourself obsessively planning every 15 minutes of a vacation just to keep from melting down? Or maybe you've realized you're micromanaging everyone around you just to quiet the noise in your own head. Welcome back to Chris and Jen in the Morning. Chris and Jen tackle a topic they know all too well: the intersection of anxiety and control.
I feel like that drop in my stomach. You know how when you're on a roller coaster, I know you don't love roller coasters, but
I talk about anxiety with you soon. I don't need help being elevated.
but it's like, to me, whenever it drops,
Your stomach
and that stomach,
somersaults.
yes, exactly. Whenever I'm in situations where I feel that way, I take that as my sign of we're starting to feel a certain way. What's going on? Like, then I start
So
my process of
interesting.
trying to figure out what's causing it.
Today, they're digging into how our brains perceive threats and why we try to manage internal chaos by gripping our external surroundings a little too tight. From physical symptoms like roller coaster stomach drops to clenching your jaw, this conversation is about recognizing when our coping mechanisms stop serving us and start escalating the very stress we're trying to avoid. Join the community as we explore how to loosen the grip and find more purposeful path forward. Let's get into it.
Welcome to Chris and Jen in the Morning.
Where self-care meets real life.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Jen. We are so excited to be back.
I know, it's been a couple of weeks.
It has been a couple weeks. We had to take a break in recording so that you could go to the ever amazing Hawaii.
I know, it was
And-
so great.
Yeah, I really appreciate all the pictures that I demanded and you complied in sending because it was gorgeous. How was it?
It was so fun. It was very relaxing. I was able to truly step away. I do think the time difference, the 5 hours, which is, almost a whole day difference in time from work and life happening over on this side of the world. So it was just nice to truly disconnect and be able to enjoy the time off. We were there celebrating some of our friends who got married, and they are adorable. Their wedding was absolutely gorgeous. And it was my first time there. So we took a week to truly explore, go around a couple of the islands, and had a lot of fun. Frank loves taking pictures, videos, and all of that stuff. So it is thanks to him
Yes.
that so many of those pictures and videos made their way to you.
And they are adorable. Adorable. It's been a very long time since I've been to Hawaii, and I definitely need to go back. This is just reaffirmation for me that I need to go back because it was just beautiful.
They do a cruise that goes around the all the islands.
That's what we did. Well,
Okay.
not all of them, but the main islands. Yeah, but I kind of would like to go and experience it the way you did, where you actually
Okay.
stay on the islands. And you went to the main island and then to Maui, right?
We went to Honolulu and
Uh-huh.
to Maui.
So it was, just gorgeous. So thank you for sharing and welcome back because I missed you.
I think that's the longest we've gone without actually talking.
Yeah, I almost died. I think I told you that when you got back, and then you were dealing with jet lag, and I was like, "Hi, I know you're doing whatever you're doing over there, but I can't handle this anymore. We gotta talk."
You gotta respond to me.
Also, are you dead? Because you're not texting me back, and it's
I know where you live and I will come there.
I did look, and I see that you're at home right now.
Safe space, safe space.
Stalker match.
Look, that's why you share locations with people.
I just wanted to make sure you weren't dead. I'm really glad that you had a good time. And I'm really glad that you got to go and just kind of take a break and see the world and explore. And I'm glad that you're back because I missed you a lot. And I'm excited today because today we're going to talk about anxiety.
Anxiety. Oh,
It's a topic I know really well. We're going to talk about how controlling your surroundings is sometimes what we do to manage anxiety, and like why we do that and why it might actually escalate us instead of, de-escalating us, or may deepen the anxiety. And this is a topic that I know I relate incredibly deeply to. So when we were going back and forth talking about what we were going to talk about today, I was like, this is the one. I'm sure.
This
I
speaks
ac-
very loudly to me.
I actually thought, I don't know if this speaks to you, but you gave it to me, so I'm
No,
picking it.
I do think as I have like I was preparing and getting ready, like although I do experience anxiety, I have a lot of friends who are diagnosed with anxiety, and so I think a lot of my perspective of this is seeing other people dealing with it and how like I can show up for them, and also some things I've probably learned for myself as things that I didn't think was anxiety, but actually
Well, and I think there is a difference between being anxious or healthy anxiety, which is actually really normal
right.
and healthy, and a thing that you're like serves us to push us forward sometimes. And then the anxiety as we sort of talk about it or know it culturally, which is like when it goes too far. And neither of us are doctors, but my approach or perspective coming into this is as somebody who is diagnosed, who does struggle with this. And I do think that there are a lot of different reasons, which we're not going to get into today, that people struggle with anxiety. Could be just kind of your chemical makeup, it could be learned behaviors, it could be coping mechanisms. But really, like, that's not important to the discussion we want to have today. What we really want to talk about is our response to anxiety, and when that response becomes control, and how to recognize and manage through that,
Yeah.
and understand when that actually does not serve us.
Right.
So excited to get into this today, not only because I think it'll be helpful for many people, but it's growth for me, for my own self. So, but before we get into that, we do want to remind you we are building this community. And the reason that Chris and I decided to share these conversations in a podcast form with the world is because we felt like these are the things that we talk about are things that many people like struggle with or can relate to or have input on that could help us. And so we really want to build a community to come support, all of us in this journey of self growth and finding happiness, and just living a more fulfilled life. So if you want to be a part of that community, we would love to have you follow, subscribe, like, comment, join us and help us build our community. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on YouTube. Like, let's have a conversation together. Share with us what you
Yeah.
think.
Join in. It is meant to be a conversation. And like you said, we have found through our lives that this just isn't stuff that you and I are talking about. We actually find that we're talking about it with others as well. So therefore, there's probably a lot more of these conversations happening than we know.
Yeah, and we would love to have the conversation with you, not just, with each other while all of you listen, but with all of you. So we invite you in. So let's move into gratitude moment also before we get started. And Chris, do you want to start us out?
Would love to. I am just so grateful for all of the friends that I have and that I'm surrounded by. And I'm sure I have done this and shared this before, but when we went on our trip, we weren't able to take Ollie with us. And, he usually always travels with us. So
Little
always leaving
Ulster.
him causes some anxiety in us. So knowing that you're leaving your pet with someone that you trust and who, wants to care for them in the same way and fashion that you do. We have a great friend who came and stayed with him while we were gone. I'm so appreciative of them. We most recently had a friend in our friend group who had a procedure and had some complications, and the friend that was kind of with him through that kept us all in the loop and informed. And so it's really reminded me that having like a strong connection with your friends and people who show up for you and care for you. And it's important. Like, it makes you feel like you have that. You guys taking care of the podcast stuff while I've been away. Like, we all have lives. Like, this is something that we do in addition to. And when one or more of us is gone, like that stuff shifts. Like, things still have to happen, and they continue to happen. And I'm just so grateful for the people I've surrounded myself with.
I love that. I love that. I mean, we're on this journey of life, and it's just so much richer when we do it together.
Yep.
Um, I was so funny. So we don't talk about these ahead of time, but similarly, my gratitude moment today is about the community that I find myself surrounded in. I've had a few scenarios happen in the last like 6 months where there people were intentionally unkind to me. And some of these were people that I knew very well, and some of these were strangers. But in each of the scenarios that were coming to mind as I was thinking about this, words were said with intent to damage and harm. And as I was thinking about that, I thought, well, like in each of those scenarios, it did really hurt, but just for a moment, because I am surrounded by so many people that I am so grateful individually for and collectively for. I mean, in some of these scenarios, they were kind of public, and there were people that I haven't actually had a conversation with in years who I still adore that reached out to me and said, I don't know if you saw this, but like, I need to make sure that you're okay. And, you, Chris, are one of the people where I can call you and be like, oh my gosh, like somebody said this to me and it just really stings. And the kindness that the people around me, strangers and friends and my life partner and Ace, like alike, the kindness that exists so far outweighs the hatefulness and the intent to harm. And I'm just really grateful for that. I was thinking about that this morning, thinking, it's so common to get hung up on the things that hurt, but like there's so much around us to support us and help us. And I'm really grateful for that. So just bringing that into my gratitude moment this morning.
Friends and the people we surround ourselves with, important community.
Yeah, I was also going, oh, yeah, this is why we choose to intentionally practice gratitude, to remind us what we can focus on and not just all the hard things, but all of the opportunities around us to be grateful. Um, so, hey, people that are trying to be mean, you just gave me an opportunity to have, a really wonderful experience in spite of you.
In spite of you.
In spite of you. So over the last several weeks, we've talked about feelings that can be overwhelming. We've talked about how to not get stuck when you feel in the middle of uncertainty. We talked about the power of micro changes and how, like, making big changes in life can happen through little tiny intentional
changes,
movements. And we've talked about resilience and what it is, and how to hold on to and maintain resilience through our ever-changing lives. And so today we do want to talk about anxiety and that urge that I'm sure people can relate to manage the anxiety that is happening within us by controlling everything around us. And neither of us are doctors, as we mentioned, but we are certainly people that on varying levels can relate to this topic, and also have people around us that can relate to this topic too. So I know, Chris, one of the questions that you had brought up is like, where do you physically feel anxious when it happens? And so talk about that. Where do you physically feel anxiety start to manifest for you?
Yeah, so I know that this is something that's different for everyone. And so as we were preparing for this, I really started to think like how anxiety can show up in our lives, and then that got me to like, well, how do we know like that's the point, like that's where we're getting to, we're having these feelings of anxiousness. And for me, it kind of brought me back to like my mid-20s, where I first really started to, like, I bought a house when I was in like my early 20s, and then I had my like coming out journey not long after that. And that's when I first really started the real feelings of like anxiety in life. And interestingly enough, as I reflect back on all of that, where it starts with me is like in the pit of my stomach. Like when I get anxious, I don't want to eat. I don't like, I think I've like had an ulcer before because of this. Like I just feel it in the pit of my stomach, and I just always feel uncomfortable. Can't really, anytime like food is brought up or wanting to go out, like it's just not anything that is I'm interested in. And so for me, whenever I start to feel like, whenever I start to see like those symptoms, I guess is the best way to put it. Like I feel like that drop in my stomach, and it's not something like, you know how when you're on a roller coaster, I know you don't love roller coasters, but
talk about anxiety inducing. I don't need help being elevated.
But it's like, to me, it's like that, like whenever it drops, like
your stomach
and that
somersaults.
stomach, yes, exactly. And that's how, so now I'm more aware of that. So whenever I'm in situations where I feel that way, I take that as my sign of, okay, we're starting to feel a certain way, what's going on? Like, and then I start
So
my process of
interesting.
trying to figure out what's causing it. Cause to me, it's not always like the blaring obvious thing that, you know, whatever the situation is I may be going through. So I start to like peel back the onion to figure out what's actually at the root of the anxiety. But that to me is like how it shows up and how I start to try and find control again.
I think for me, and you know, I'm sure that there are people out there that can relate to this. What I have started to realize just in opening up this conversation over the past year in our podcast is that, like, I think I have actually learned through my life, and probably at a really young age, to turn off or turn down the noise about physical like signs, or like we talk about listening to yourself. And, you know, not only am I uncomfortable doing that emotionally, but like physically. And I've started to notice and pay more attention to this. And I know when you were here, one of the more recent times, you know, I was giving you my list of like physically how I was feeling after I had already like escalated beyond. And you had said, it sounds like that sounds like you're feeling anxious. And I was like that hadn't occurred to me. And I think what I've started to realize is that often, like, when I've when I notice that I am physically feeling anxious is after it's already climbed into a more extreme feeling. And I do like carry, I know, and I've been told I carry my anxiety in my shoulders and my jaw, like everything is really tight. But before you get there, like you're clenching your jaw and everything is becoming tight. And like I don't notice until it's already gone too far. Or my husband will, you know, put his hand on my back, in the center of my back, and rub it to like help me calm down. And that very much feels like a calming, soothing thing. But, you know, I mean, this is how I found myself like having a panic attack and being confused and like going, no, this can't be a panic attack because I've already escalated beyond. I like just blew past all of those physical indicators that would tell me that I'm escalating. And I didn't really even notice that anything was physically happening with my body until I got well beyond. And I do think that that has in part, like that coping mechanism has in part really served my resilience. But I also think I'm in a place where I realize that may not be the healthiest, especially if I want to live like a long time without this taking a physical toll on my body.
Yeah.
And my doctor telling me several years ago, I remember him looking me in the face and going, Jen, like I have seen people get Bell's palsy from anxiety that they are not dealing with and managing, and I am concerned about you. And going, like, what is he talking about?
That is interesting about you seeing it as like as a pro, is it helping with your, like it's made you resilient? Like,
What's a coping mechanism, right?
yes, absolutely. But I do think like there's this idea around resilience that's like it's also your ability to like bounce back from things. And so like
Mhm.
it's a difference between like powering through versus like acknowledging it's a tough situation right now. I just have to hang on for so much longer. And then like being able to step, like once you've reached a certain point, you're able to like stop and kind of come back. Like,
Well, I think that's assuming you have all the tools to be able to process things. And I think I have had this unique opportunity to really, this past year, invest in, you know, giving myself more tools, understanding myself. And really, it was about creating the mental space. I say it's a unique opportunity. Um, but I think it was an intentional opportunity to say this is actually really important to me, and I need more tools in my toolkit, not just to like figure out how to manage each of these situations, but to really start digging in and understanding like what's actually going on underneath all of the layers. And we're not going to dig into all of that today, but it was just really, I thought it would be interesting to share that while I know this is not something everyone can relate to, just thinking about where do I feel this physically in my body, starting to create this awareness that, like, I think I am not really even tuned into where I start to feel it.
yeah.
And that's something that I need to start exploring more because what I'm noticing is like once it's already escalated. So interesting.
Well, and like we've talked previously about having like a close friend group or trusted advisors that like can you can speak openly and feel safe with. Like, I think that's kind of also the benefit of it. So like you mentioned how you shared those things with me and I was able to say, oh, well, this is what it sounds like. Like, I wouldn't just do that for anyone. Like, you have to have a relationship with someone and know that you're not like going to upset them or whatever. Like,
Yes, you're not allowed to just go to any person and be like, you look like you're having anxiety right now.
you look very anxious. What's going on?
um, which I have to remind myself of. Just because it's well intended doesn't mean
Right.
that it's well received. And we
Exactly.
do have to think about that. But it is good to have those people in your life that you can start and on your own timeline, start to pull in and help you explore the things that you are not yet prepared to explore. So as we talk about awareness, if this is something that you are struggling to get a handle on, for me, it's been helpful to seek some of that external advice or external observance from my close circle to kind of get a handle on what's going on with me. So let's talk about this like need to control and why that is something that is so commonly linked to feeling anxious and what happens with that.
Yeah, so I think whenever I think about this topic and I look back at like the week that I've had and the different ways that I try to start to control things so that way I don't have these feelings of anxiousness and I'm trying to like avoid this, or maybe I'm already starting to feel it and how it starts to show up throughout my week is very different. There's this idea that you start to like micromanage things within your life. But I think it's like one of those things that when we are trying to grasp control and we're to kind of jump into the neuroscience here, it's like your brain is perceiving these threats. And so you are now trying to stop those threats. And how do you do that?
To be clear, I have been called a micromanager. And probably my response to that is, well, if you just did it right, I wouldn't have to micromanage it. Does that sound like something I would say? I don't know.
Absolutely does.
I'm
But
not sure.
I don't think like you would say that to the person.
Oh, well, it depends on who the person is.
Yeah.
It depends on how in control of my mouth I am at the moment. It also, that can be in like also just ruminating. So we've talked about rumination before. And I think rumination is like a step in the control process of going back over and over and over and over something again and thinking like, do I need to rewrite this text to get it exactly so because I'm trying to control what somebody else hears or thinks when they read it, or emails, or, the calendar, or, oh my gosh, Like sometimes it can serve well, but like my favorite example of this is we went to Disney World and I was so stressed out by all of the people because I'd always been told I was a people person. And so I didn't understand why being in a crowd full of lots of people would be stressful to me. So I had not yet accepted that that actually was like a huge trigger for my anxiety.
Yeah.
And so because I couldn't accept that this was something that was making me anxious, but because I was absolutely overwhelmed by it, what I did was dove into the planning and made like a spreadsheet. I think it was every 15 minutes in the day. Now I'm not great at time either, but like and of each day and like where I thought we were going to potentially be in the park and like all of the information about which way to go and what rides, because I didn't want to spend all my time waiting in line. You know, I wanted to have the best experience you
Right.
could have, but I also didn't want to, I know that like when I'm overwhelmed, I just can't solution on the fly. And so I didn't want everyone to be looking at me saying, what should we do next? And then not have an answer because I would melt down. So but I also know that things probably wouldn't go to plan. So I had a flex plan in my plan. So I had this calendar of each day and what park we were going to be at and when the park opened and when it closed and what the early hours were and what rides we were going to try to ride at which part and where we were going to go in the park and then where we might be that we might want to eat. And like I even like what the items on the menu were that would be good. Like basically trying to take every choice out of the equation because choice drives further anxiety. And I got to say that my family was not happy about my spreadsheet, but it
They
felt
didn't like their spreadsheet vacation?
it felt
But I do think like you saying that there are times where this is beneficial, I think is important because I do think like there are like we've talked about how, feelings are signals. And I do think like in some instances it is a good thing to like have a plan and understand.
failure to plan is a plan to fail.
But I do think like in those instances, like that's where like that over control comes into place and you're trying to control your situation because you already know that there's things that are going to be outside of your control.
A good thing turned up too loud.
That is a really good way to say that. A good thing turned up too loud.
Well, that's a Jen quote. And I can relate to that because how many times have I been told I'm too loud? My whole life. We know that control often spikes when uncertainty spikes. So I mentioned in the example that I shared, every time there was a decision to be made, I was trying to just plan that so that I wouldn't have to
Correct.
make a decision and like replace any decisioning with a plan. But instead of figuring out and understanding at that point and articulating, like, I know this is going to stress me out. So, how are we going to handle these decision points so that I don't, for some reason, assume that it will be my responsibility, which I'm doing to myself? I decided, well, let's just let the spreadsheet tell us what to do.
We will always default to what the spreadsheet tells us to do.
And well, we did end up having one of those magical Disney moments, as Ace and I label them. And that's when you've paid all of this money to go to Disney World and have, the most magical time of your life because no one pays all that money and expects it's going to be mediocre. It's going to be the best thing you've ever done. Families are just screaming at each other in the middle of the park and children are crying and husbands and wives and husbands and husbands and wives and whatever are like just yelling at each other. And we call that a magical Disney moment because that is what the art of the anxiety cooker brings out in all of us.
You've been trying to get me to go to Disney with you for how long now?
Okay,
These are the magical moments you want me to experience?
No, because I think if you are aware, like, that you're putting all this pressure on and you plan appropriately, but not over-planned, like, look, I'm not going to take you with the spreadsheet. Don't worry. I've been there. I've had some feedback. We went with no plan the next time, and everybody also had a miserable time. And that was a way for me to basically take my spreadsheet out and hit everyone on the head with it and say, see? But there is something in between the Disney spreadsheet and the no plan. There's something in between there. And it is really magical. I do love Disney World. I love being immersed in the magic of it. I met Mickey Mouse for the first time, and I know that it is a short person in a costume. Like, I know that. But I cried.
It still gave you all the feels.
I mean, like, I stood there and cried like somebody who did not know that I was meeting a person dressed up in a costume.
See,
It
that's
was
a magical
magical.
Disney moment. Yeah.
It was magical
But
because
see,
it's where all your
that's,
dreams can come true.
yes. And you can apparently test relationships
Yeah,
and
we
family dynamics.
made it through. We made it through, and we're better for it. So if you're headed to Disney World, just like got some tips in a different episode to avoid those magical Disney moments. But that's not what this podcast is about.
No. But I do think like you kind of just hit on all of the things about like what our brain is doing whenever you're in that scenario. So like you knew that when people were going to look at you, that was going to make you feel a certain way. You wanted to have answers. So your brain in the planning process is already detecting that as like this future threat. And so you want to enjoy your time. You want to have fun. You want to be able to have answers when people ask you those questions. And that's fine because your brain wants that predictability. And so this is where like our prefrontal cortex comes into play with logic and strategy. So then that planning provides that control for you to kind of pull back from this idea of everyone looking at you. Well, where are we going now? I'm hungry. Where should we eat? Like the fact that you even pulled the menus is like very impressive. I don't even think I would have like thought to do that.
I mean, I dove all the way. I have a knack for looking at the detail, sometimes missing that bigger picture of like, but Jen, we're all here just to enjoy this. I'm like, no, we're going to win the gold medal of doing this the best. For the cheapest, we're going to have the most fun. We're going to do it for the cheapest ever. It's going to be the best thing anyone's ever done. We're going to just win the gold medal of Disney tripping on the very first time that we've been there. There was an intensity about all of this. It's just so Jen. But I will say, like, I think you could apply the same kind of experience of need for control to like our everyday lives as well. So when I think about we've talked a lot about, there's so much happening in the US right now that kind of spills out globally, of course. But especially what's going on here. And there's so much conflict and tension around topics that have been politicized that really aren't actually about politics. And when you take topics that aren't really political, they're moral and values based, but you try and make them or label them as political, I think that triggers a lot of anxiety and makes for high stakes conversations. And I see this happening or can relate to this. And we've talked about wanting to have conversations where we actually hear each other. And it's not about getting somebody else to agree. But I do think that people get really anxious. And what drives that anxiety and having those conversations is like you can't control what the other person's going to say or how they're going to feel or how it's going to make you feel. You feel like you're out of control because here we are talking about something that, is like has really been escalated. I know that I'm like it's a hot button for me already and I may fly off the handle and then you just start to like to be in this place where you can't even have a conversation. And so either you avoid or people just end up going from 0 to 10,000. I do think that it is in my opinion, I think that there is this bit of desire to control that happens in those conversations. And then people get really upset when all of a sudden they realize that they no longer are in control of the narrative or can't control how the other person thinks. And it doesn't matter what side of that conversation you're coming in from. I think it happens, no matter what your perspective is. So I don't know if you can relate to that. But
yeah, I think a lot of that also comes out of this idea that we think we can engage in these conversations and we can change people's minds.
yeah,
Like
which is
having
really,
this control that is actually not real.
yeah. It's not just about wanting to be heard. It's about wanting to control what somebody else thinks.
Exactly.
And I mean, if you think about politics in general, like, is that not the purpose of most of the communication that happens from politicians? They're trying to control what people think because that's how they get votes. But I think we've overleaned into that as a society. Everybody's just like pinging super high.
Yeah.
on this. So let's talk a little bit more about that. You talked about like the prefrontal cortex. Control gives us this like illusion of certainty. When you have this illusion of certainty, because you have this control, if it's working, then your cortisol may dip down and the brain says, okay, just keep doing what you're doing. It's like more spreadsheets. Do more Disney spreadsheets. That's what you need. And then the situation just escalates bigger and bigger and bigger because you keep doing the things that are actually stressing you out. Because what my best and favorite parenting advice, this is my best and favorite parenting advice. Feel free to disagree with me, but it is to realize from before they are born that you are not in control of literally any of it. Nothing. They actually hold a lot more control than you do. Like they're in control of what they do. And you can influence it, but you are not in control of it. But it is also to not let them know that until they have reached an age at which they can be responsible with that knowledge. It's my best parenting advice. Because if I think about back through parenting and I was, started that journey really young and I was still growing up myself, right? So Ace and I are, just babies, raising baby. And I would not change that for the world, but like not knowing what to do, but of course, lean into controls right on brand for me. And then, you can't actually control another human, nor do I desire to raise a human that has no like strong will of their own. And you get mad when you realize that you're not in control of the situation. You get frustrated and mad and stressed and anxious. If you just set that expectation ahead of time that you're not in control, then you don't have to deal with the realization that you're not in control when you were trying to trick yourself that you were.
Yeah, I mean, this is happening all around us all the time. Like parenting is a perfect example because it's one of those things that there's like a differential in power, authority. Like, so you think like you have this amount of control that actually, like when you're dealing with any individual, like
they have free will.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, you need to set boundaries. Like, the whole thing about parenting is trying to help your children understand that decisions have consequences and to help them understand that in a safe environment before those consequences can become, life ruining. Right. Yeah. And so, there are lots of books written about how to do that. I mean, I'm not here to talk about that today, but I really do think that for me, and I wish I would have realized this much earlier in life because the parenting journey would have, I think, been a lot more fun. And don't get me wrong, it is my favorite job, but I do think it would have been more fun for literally everybody involved had I realized I actually wasn't in control of anything. I just was there to guide and influence.
Yeah, like I think we have this idea that whenever we're in control, like we now have this ability to change the outcome. It's almost like, it wears it as a mask so that there's this level of responsibility that I now have, and because I am responsible, I can take control of this and I can change the outcome. And all reality, really what you're doing is just causing your own body to start to go into this threat mode, and now you're driving yourself into this more stressed state.
Yeah, and then the realization that you are not in control when you have not yet accepted that drives your need for more control. And it's just this escalating cycle. I mean, like it's a cycle that serves itself. So it's a self-serving cycle in that. It's just feeding itself more and more and more, but it does not serve you and did not serve me. And so I think realizing, wait a second, I don't want to be on this merry-go-round anymore. I'd like to get off and try something different.
But I think like that right there is at the crux of like why we're talking about this, right? Because we fall into patterns. We fall into the like allowing our bodies, our minds to do the things that they are meant to do, but realizing that those things are happening because of situations we're in, the way we're reacting, the way that we're showing up, like whenever we can see those things happening and understand why our bodies and minds are reacting the way that they are, we can kind of pull back from that. And I mean, I know we're talking about control, but like you can then start to make choices like, do I really need to be worried about this? Is this really something that deserves this much time and attention? And maybe it is. Like, maybe you should be on that, merry-go-round.
But at least you're deciding to be.
Exactly.
Versus finding yourself there and going, how did I get on this merry-go-round? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not choosing this. Yeah, absolutely. There's a difference between agency and control. Realizing you have agency and then this insatiable desire to control things in order to reduce your anxiety. So this shows up really sneaky, little forms. It just sneaks in there. And in fact, if you're not paying attention, you're going to find you're on the merry-go-round before you even knew you hopped on.
Yeah.
It sneaks in with hyper planning, like we've talked about. Chris, how does this show up in travel for you?
So for me, having just been on this journey, we booked our flights. I went from booking our flights, I put them on our calendar, the push notifications on our apps so that, it's telling us when our flights, we need to check in, your flight is coming up. Like, all of those reminders are happening. Yet I still go back to the app 62 times to see, like, what time is that flight again? Is it still on time? Meanwhile, it was literally from leaving the hotel lobby to get in the car, and I'm checking again to make sure the flight is still on time. Like, there was maybe a 2-minute difference. There were no updates.
I cannot relate to that, which shouldn't be a surprise because time's just a mystery to me. I do the math and then I rely on the math of how long do I have to be there. And every time I start to get scared about it, I just tell myself, no, you did the math. You did the math. It's going to be okay. You did the math.
You're going to be okay.
You're going to be okay. And then I go to the bathroom every 6 seconds.
It's a true story.
Because I can control my body function. So that's how I'm exerting control. But for me, I'm also really stressed about having to use the bathroom on the airplane. Like,
that's true.
Terrifying thing. But for me, I know what seat I'm sitting in. I know. I already know. I know. And yet I have to look at that seat like 16A. You're in 16. No, I'm not. If I'm having a good day, I'm never in A. It's always C or D. I'm an aisle kind of girl. Like, I cannot breathe back in there, be stuck, start to get like claustrophobic, which really is what it's about. I feel very claustrophobic if I am not on the aisle. So have fun with me there on the plane. I've gotten feedback about my plane riding experience with people that travel with me. Like, I do try and shove it all down. It just comes out in the wiggling and the, yeah. But I like looking, okay, 16C, I'm in 16C. And I have to look like you're standing on the jet bridge. You get on the jet bridge and you're looking and you get like, 10 steps into the jet bridge and you pull it back up again because, did my seat change? Did I forget? Is it still 16C?
Is it still?
Is it still? I'm like getting on the plane and walking down and, I've got my carry-on luggage because I can't let somebody else take my luggage. I'm not going to check luggage unless I really have to. So I'm dragging all of that through the aisle while I'm looking at the phone. Am I still 16C or has it changed? Knowing it's not going to change. That's how it comes out for me. Hyper planning is one. Overthinking is one. So rereading your texts over and over again, replaying conversations in your head. You're mentally rehearsing like worst case scenarios, which, we're not saying that it is bad to think things through or plan or forecast or like consider what could the consequences be. It's when you're like ruminating on them over and over again or only thinking about the worst case scenarios and getting yourself stuck there. Like, you're just taking yourself on a journey that may not be the most optimal experience. And oftentimes when I find I've been on the worst case scenario train and I get stuck there, the worst case scenario is not actually what happens. And so my experience could have been maybe less stressful.
Yeah. But isn't that like the funny thing about all of this, right? Like, our brain is trying to prepare us. It's trying to protect us, take care of us. So therefore, we're going to live in this like worst case scenario world. And so like you end up having this sense of preparation that actually
you didn't need.
Yeah, unnecessary.
And all of your like body chemistry is still geared up towards that. So I can tell you there have been a few times where like Ace and I were in this fight and I'm all geared up for the fight. And like very quickly and very immediately, he has this beautiful way of de-escalating that he's so good at. And he just de-escalates it. And I think I have said to him on a number of occasions, well, I don't know what to do with that because I'm still I still feel angry right now. Like it's like still just coursing through me. And I like did not have a chance to, you know,
So you may have argued it in your mind, but you did not get to
I
speak
mean,
it.
it may not even be that. Like I spoke it and I was all prepared for this like back and forth. And he just de-escalates the whole thing. And I'm like, well, I am still physically worked up. So I'm going to have to go on a walk because I am still ready to fight, even though I don't want to have a fight. So I don't know what to do with myself right now. Have you ever been in that situation?
Yes, absolutely. Like so many times. And I think that's the false narrative that we have is like we move into those worst case scenario plannings because we don't want to be caught by surprise. We don't want to. And so we get worked up about it and we're ready for that, whatever it may be. Then whenever it actually does not come to be, you're like,
well, what do I do with all these feelings now? I don't know. Like,
but
I just need to scream at somebody for a minute.
Right. Like in those moments, like my shoulders are tight. My jaw is tight. Like
Yeah.
I am.
To be clear, even if you are amped up, I do not condone screaming. That is not a nice way to have a conversation. But yeah.
Look, I think as somebody who I had to receive that feedback, not in a workplace setting, but like in my relationship, like when I get upset, like I raise my voice, and
I just don't even believe that to be true.
You can talk to Frank about it, but
I don't think I have ever seen you raise your voice ever. And I must have given you a million times opportunities to be mad at me.
A couple million, but who's counting?
It's just passive. He doesn't feel safe enough to raise his voice at me. I don't know.
Yeah, I will say like it has, like when I do raise my voice, I'm definitely like only amongst like.
I hope we never, because I never want to make you feel that way.
Right.
But if you did raise your voice at me, probably what would happen is I would be really surprised and then just start laughing. Because you're the most soft-spoken person.
Right, like my yelling is probably someone's normal speaking tone.
I don't mean like laughing at you like, ha ha, like I'm making fun of you. I just mean like laughing at you because you yelling is like literally, I just can't comprehend it.
Okay, well, you can chat with Frank about it.
That probably would not help things, would it? If I laughed
probably
at you,
not.
If you were that mad at me.
If I am that upset, that probably would not help the situation.
Okay, well, I hope I want to experience you yelling at somebody else. But I don't want that for anyone else either. Maybe a computer. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah. That, everyone has probably been upset at their computer.
Let's get the intern in
here. This one other one that I want to talk about is one because I find as we were preparing for this conversation, I was thinking about how trying to manage other people's reactions and things. And this is something that throughout my career, I try to prepare people for conversations they're going to have or the interactions that they're going into. And as I was thinking about this, I was really trying to understand, like, what am I whenever I'm having these conversations with people and prepping them and helping them get ready, what am I actually trying to do? And where I kind of settled on this is it's not so much control of the person or the outcome that they're going into this conversation with. It's to prepare them so that way they are not at this like heightened place whenever they are going into conversations. And a lot of times when you go into certain situations, you're not prepared for the what ifs, right? Like your mind can go all over the place. And there are times whenever I'm talking to people and they start down this path of, well, what if they say this? Well, what if they do that? What if this happens? What I try to do in those situations is, okay, well, let's talk about those things. Like, let's just practice what you would say.
Mm-hmm.
And I have gotten feedback that people actually walk away from those types of conversations with me actually feeling more comfortable because when you're asking those questions by yourself, you're rarely in the space to be able to reflect and like put your brain like, okay, but what would you actually say if someone said that to you? To me, like that's an interesting way as we were talking about control and trying to manage others' reactions to things. It's not so much that I'm trying to manage.
I think that's how this looks in a healthy way to deploy it. I think one of the things that I've learned is when I'm surprised or caught off guard, like my mind goes blank. I just sort of freeze. And that's something that I'm working through, trying to identify like what causes that reaction, why, where does that come from, all those things, but in my own personal journey, but I do know that about myself. And working with people, like they tend to surprise you a lot. And
all the time.
the time. And so what I've realized is that that is a really helpful thing for me to do ahead of having conversations with people that might be high stakes, is think about, okay, how could they potentially respond to this? And I'm not trying to think about every single option because you're never going to get there, but I always try and think about, okay, what if this goes really well? How might they respond? How might I respond? What if this goes really poorly? How might they respond? How might I respond? What if this goes like neutral? How would they respond? How would I respond? And I find that that usually prepares me well for how am I going, because I can play somewhere in that range. Um, and when I go like worst case scenario, it's like irrational. Because that's, I think, like, I'm always anticipating that people are going to be logical and rational, and like especially in high stakes conversations that is just not common, or I guess it is not uncommon for people to respond illogically, and I just get so confused. Like that does not compute. 2 plus 2 does not equal 17 or green or um pasta. Like 2 plus 2 does not equal pasta. Like where are we? And then I just get stuck and I freeze, and then everything gets worse. And so I always also try and plan for an out. Like, okay, if I feel myself getting stuck, or if I'm preparing a leader, okay, if they say something and you feel stuck, or the conversation escalates and you don't know what to say, here's how you can exit the conversation gracefully to then pick back up the conversation at a time once you've had a chance to think through it. And I think that those are healthy controls. So we want to be very clear that control is not a bad thing, just like feelings of anxiousness are not inherently bad. It is when these things get overblown. And often when we talk about anxiety, it's like past that productive point.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about when it does backfire, because I do think like some of us maybe are familiar with how that can happen.
What? What are you talking about?
I do think like it's this weird like paradox that the more we try to control everything, the more anxious we become, because that, like, we talk about that merry-go-round. So like I'm feeling anxious about whatever, so then I start to go into control mode and control it. Oh, I'm all of a sudden feeling better about that. So then when another similar situation pops up, you shift into that and you start doing that. Well, then that just becomes more and more and more. Like it just becomes more weight to carry.
Yeah.
And we have this thought that, oh, but this is all working out because I'm in control.
Well, and what's so interesting about that is that uncertainty and tolerance, or that feeding that intolerance for uncertainty and choosing to reaffirm for yourself, maybe not directly, but indirectly, by not trusting yourself to handle or navigate through uncertainty, that increases your sensitivity to anxiety. So it's a cycle that just feeds itself. If you don't allow yourself to step into the unknown,
Yeah.
and work through it, then like those muscles get weaker and they disappear. And we all know, as we grow up, the muscles we once had look different over time when we don't continue to exercise them.
That is a very nice way of saying that.
Yeah.
They look differently.
They look different over time, if you don't continue to put those reps in every day. And so your sensitivity towards anxiety heightens. But, just as the muscles can shrink, they can also grow as you lean into it. So, if you're feeling like, ooh, that's hitting something, and you haven't listened to the conversation we had about leaning into uncertainty and not getting stuck in uncertainty, that might be a good thing to think about listening to, or to push yourself on, because I do think that they go hand in hand.
Yeah, they certainly do.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to feel in control because it makes us feel like we have control. We have power. we can influence the outcome. But then reality always seems to have a way to come in and be like, ooh, gotcha.
Yeah, like control is actually not power at all. It's like this false sense of you're distracted thinking that you're on top of the mountain and then somebody comes in and takes you down. Uh,
As someone who recently drove around some very scary mountains, the idea of that is petrifying.
So we're all bought in at this place of, all right, so, when control gets overblown, it becomes unhealthy. It's not really the best way to de-escalate anxiety or manage anxiety. So what do I do instead? So instead of making my spreadsheet that makes literally everyone on this vacation with me want to take it, print it out, and bang me in the head with it, or push me out of the car, even though they're too nice to do it, or checking my phone 75 times while I knock everybody down the aisle with my luggage. What do I do instead? And I think one of the first things you can do is one of your favorite things.
One of my favorite things. You got to name it to tame it. You have to know what you're actually afraid of in these situations. And so when you start to feel that anxiety bubbling up and that oh, I need to begin to control this, instead of thinking I need to figure this out, try looking at it from a different lens. Try saying something like, what am I afraid will happen? Because in that reality, like whatever it may be, you controlling the situation may not actually impact the outcome.
Well, and I think for some people, the question to start realizing, creating awareness, and like being able to name it to tame it is the question that you were asking, like, where do you physically feel it? And then I think for other people, like for me, that may not be the best way of catching the early signs. Because by the time I physically know what's going on with myself, I may be too far down the path. So, or farther down the path than I'd like to be before I intervene. So, mm, I think in addition to asking, like, okay, how am I physically feeling? There's like, what am I doing? Like, what do I find myself doing? So, like the example I shared at the beginning, like I was, or I think I may have actually been sharing this with you before we got started. I went to the chiropractor, and, he was asking me, like, well, why are like things were like super out? Like, were you feeling it? And I said to him, like, no, I wasn't really feeling like I was in pain. And then I was like, but obviously, like, I'm here. And so I knew I had to come in. I wonder what that was. I wonder what that was that I was feeling. But
What brought me here?
yeah, but starting to realize, like, what actions are you taking? Listening to like the subconscious decisions that you're making, because oftentimes, like, the subconscious part of me is already in motion, doing the things to respond to what I am not yet listening to. And I think by tuning into that, that's how I start to really listen in a little bit earlier and go, okay, like I was on autopilot while my brain was doing all these other things. Now I need to start checking in on that.
It is just so fascinating, our friendship, because I can't really relate to anything that you just said.
What do you mean?
I mean, like, if I am calling a doctor, making an appointment, whatever, like, I have a purpose and I know what that purpose is. And I am like, and I know that there's like routine things that
Well, no,
you have,
clearly
but
I knew I needed to be there. And he was like, wow, you're like, your pelvis was like all twisted. Like, you were really out. Were you feeling this? And like, I must have been, because I was like, no, I need to make this a priority to go. I've been really working on that, like not waiting until it gets so bad that then I'm like already like on a hole, got tons of inflammation going on, all this stuff. So like there was a part of me inside that knew.
yeah, absolutely. But I guess like what I'm saying is like this idea of just the way that your mind and body are like managing the situation is not something that I like. That is not something that I can relate to. Like if my back goes out, like I am hyper aware of it at all times. And it is like, if I am short and I am quick to anger, it is because of that. And because I know that, like, I will tell people, I am so sorry, I'm having, so if I come off as a little extra snippy, like, it's my back. It's not actually me. It doesn't actually work. People do not accept that as a reason.
I'm just like snippy. And I'm going, I don't know why I'm so snippy. And then I'm like, you know what? My back really hurts.
Yeah, well, I
I'm
mean,
just noticing that.
it takes me back to that conversation we had whenever we were headed to Pride Kelso. Like, you were in the car, you were super uncomfortable, you were moving around, all of these things, and I was just like, what's going on up there? Like, and so I think like it's those types of things, like whenever you have like that mirror that can help you see it, like that's helpful. But it's interesting to me because I don't experience it that way. And
Yeah.
so I do appreciate like the these are the things like I feel we learn from each other.
Yeah, absolutely. So if asking yourself physically how am I feeling or emotionally how am I feeling is not helping you name it to tame it, you can ask yourself like what am I doing? What kinds of things do I find myself doing? I'm terrible at picking at my fingers and my cuticles when I am stressed. And so like go from this very intense conversation or something that felt really intense or something and not notice how intense it was, but I'll look down and my hands are bleeding. And a few weeks ago, I had like 3 band-aids on my hands because clearly I'd been picking at my hands and I had to go, okay, I am clearly stressed. And so I need to check in and start like actively thinking, get out the journal that, your therapist always talks about. And like, let's just start going, okay, what am I feeling? And let's start to pull that apart. And usually it is some action I've taken like that is my first sign
Yeah.
because I'm ignoring, how I'm feeling. So I can just continue making it through. So if that's a helpful tidbit for you, take it. If you can't relate to it like Chris, then like you're probably 10 steps ahead of me. Um,
Well, as you once told me, this is not a race, it is not a competition, it is not who has it worst or who has it easiest. It is we all
we're all
have
on
our
a
own
journey.
paths.
We do. So, step 2, separate what you can influence and what you can't. So once you name it, you identify what's going on, then what do you do with it? Um, and you can control or manage or choose your response. Sometimes, I mean, sometimes you may not have the capability or the strength to do that. And so you can remove yourself from the situation. You can choose the amount of effort you put in. You can influence what your boundaries are. You can choose what you will and won't. And oftentimes we're going to talk about boundaries. And I think you guys are really going to love the journey that we're going on there because it's been a painful one. So I think it's going to mean a lot. But you actually can choose your boundaries even if you feel like you can't. But things that you cannot influence or that's not true. Things that you cannot control. You cannot control outcomes. You can influence outcomes, you cannot control them. So if they happen to be the outcome you wanted, great. But if they didn't, like you can't control that. You cannot control other people's emotions. You can influence them through how you show up, but you cannot control them. And you cannot control the future, apparently. So, as much as Back to the Future would like to let us know that we may be able to have some control over that, you don't actually get to control the
They
future.
don't. Yeah, I think here a good example that I in my career I have felt like I've had this conversation many times with people. Some of what I was doing was about like risk management. And so in that it's like, someone can sue and it's like, well, here in the United States, like basically anyone can sue anyone for anything. Like it is
Whether they'll win or not,
right,
but they can
exactly.
do it.
Exactly. And so I think like a lot of times like what I have to walk people back from is this idea of like, well, I don't want this to happen. And it's like you could do this perfectly and they can still go get an attorney and they can still do that. So like you actually can't control that. So don't spend your time rotating on those things because people are going to do what they're going to do. We just try to set ourselves up for success in case it does happen.
Like we talked about with parenting, you can influence your child and their behavior. You can set boundaries, you can create accountability, but like you cannot control. And I think this is a lot of where, parents struggle with they have this idea that's been given to them that they're supposed to be in charge or in control. Like they are supposed to be in charge, but in charge means in control, which it doesn't. And that, the children are supposed to just do what they say. And then when you have a child who is testing those boundaries, which is really normal and actually kind of healthy when we grow up to learn where your boundaries are and test them. Like that's a natural thing that happens. Like that can trigger anger because you didn't expect that, you weren't going to be in control of that situation. And then you find things, escalating to an unhealthy place.
Yep. And also a perfect, not perfect, no one's perfect, but like a good example of how to walk through that scenario.
Yeah, sometimes we do lose control and we've already done it and it's out there. We've done something that we want to take back. And, most things in life can be recovered, but we have to be willing to the further you drive the train down, the more you got to back it up.
That's right.
So, the quicker we can be at stopping the train once we realize it's on the wrong path, the less painful it is to walk it backwards.
So true. And then the third tip that we want to share is around you removed yourself from the situation and when to go regulate yourself. Get yourself back from this place of heightened fight or flight, maybe.
But I do think it's really important, particularly when you're with other people or this situation includes other people, to communicate, to figure out how to communicate those things. So I know for me to discharge all of those heightened hormones, it was really important for me to go expend them physically. Like I need to go take a walk. I need to go my body is actively jittering and I am wiggly at best when I'm relaxed. One of the things that my husband had said to me was when you leave, when we're disagreeing, I don't like that. I feel like you're walking out on me. And having to go, oh my gosh, that's not it at all. I have to go expend this. Because if I don't, my hormones are going to be responding to you and not me. And unfortunately, I'm responsible for those. And
But
so,
communication is key in those instances
yeah.
because whenever you communicate to people how you are, what you need to do, hey, I want to continue this conversation. I just can't do it right now.
And when people communicate that to you, you are best to respect it.
It's
Because
very true.
if somebody, whether they're doing it eloquently or not, is telling you that they need a break, they need to step away, you need to give them that space because that is them saying, I don't feel like I'm in control of my own response anymore and I need to cool down.
Which again, this is our bodies operating in the way that they were meant to operate.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is a matter of us trying to pull back and try to get more into that space of us being mindful of the decisions that we are making versus allowing words that we are going to regret to fly out of our mouth.
Yeah. So there's, name it to tame it, and then realize what you can and can't control, and then regulate before you release. So, like you mentioned, I talked about going and moving my body, expending that. There's slowing your breathing to slow your heart rate and get everything to chemically kind of calm down. One of my therapists once told me that, and I hate this one, that crying actually releases, when you cry, what is in your tears? It's cortisol. So crying releases stress hormone from your body. So it gets it out. It expends it out. I don't know. It also makes my eyes swollen and my head hurt and I get more dehydrated and I don't know. I'm not a fan, but some people are. So do what works for you. Delay your decision making though when you're activated. So more parenting advice. Don't throw out those consequences to your child when you're at the height of all anger because or escalation because the punishment's going to be worse for you than it will be for your kid.
I do think this is also a good one to be mindful of whenever you are having to make a decision and you don't like any of the choices to choose from. If you have the time to take a beat, to go sit with it, do that.
Take a beat.
Because it will help you in the long run.
We've talked about that too. And just before you, if you have this anxious desire to go call somebody and fix, whatever it is that's broken, take a beat because you're not going to come off in a way that makes you as proud. Most often when you are filled with all of those, that your system is being flooded with all of those hormones. Talk it out instead of solving it alone. And this is different than dumping. So emotional dumping is when you call somebody up and you just lay out everything on them. You may like yell at them, you may, all these things just to get it, and then you go, okay, I feel so much better, and you hang up.
Thank you so much for listening to all of my problems. I feel so much better. I hope you're having a good day. Bye.
Yeah, that's you can maybe get away with that in an extreme circumstance, but if that's what you're doing to people, that's called emotional dumping, and we don't want to be doing that to people because it does not make the other person feel good when you do that. But calling a trusted friend to talk something out with when you're saying, oh my gosh, like I'm feeling this way and I need an alternate way to think about this. I need and this is, Chris, what I value so much about our relationship is that like I can call you and in such a nice, lovely way without attacking me. Like you do give me an alternate way of thinking about something. You do help move me from the place that I find myself into the place that I need to be. But what I have learned over the years is that if I'm not in a place where I am ready to yet be moved, I shouldn't be calling because then I'm just dumping.
That's actually a really good way to put that. Like, I do think like you have to be in a space where you're willing, like, are you just looking for someone to validate your feelings and the way that you're thinking? And, if there's a certain person that you're upset at and you just want, to talk about that person and you don't want to be challenged in your way of thinking, like,
your
be
journal might
mindful.
be a great place for emotional dumping. Or, do it with, I don't know, journaling is a great place to do that. I don't know if doing it with ChatGPT is actually a good idea or not. This might tell you things that aren't good. Who knows? Like, journaling is a great way of emotional dumping because you can express it, you can get it out, but you don't, you're not like putting it on somebody else. But to talk it out with somebody if you're really trying to solve a problem, because that actually can be really beneficial.
Yeah.
In
I
bringing
will
somebody
say,
else in.
when you and I texted while we were on our trip at the very beginning because of something that happened.
Yeah.
And I love being that person for my friends. I love being a safe space. I love that when they bring their true authentic selves and can like just let it out. It's taken time to figure out how like to learn it's not my problem to solve, but I am happy to go on this journey with you. But I think a lot of us have like these instincts of like, oh, well, everything's going to be okay. Oh, just let it go. And I do believe, because I am likely someone who used to say those things, like, we don't say them because we don't care and there's like with no malintent, right? But for someone who's in that heightened state, like that's not helpful.
Yeah, like platitudes aren't always the most helpful thing.
Exactly. And so when you had texted me, I was not in a place where like I could like physically be present, but I also didn't want to just leave you unread. And so like I remember I had like texted you some things, and whenever I was like stepped away, had a moment to really clear my mind, I really like put myself like, if this were me, what would I want to hear? And then I try to layer on the lens of like knowing you and knowing how best to show up for people. And maybe that's an extra layer people don't need to do, but I just think it's one of those things that when you care about people, you don't offer these platitudes that are bumper sticker language. You acknowledge that you see them, you understand them, you feel them, but you also try and figure out a place of like, it's not your job to give them a soft place to land, but if you have that ability and you can speak that positivity and that helpfulness to them, like do that, because that's the power of friendship. That's the power of having a close group of people that you trust with the things that you wouldn't just go out and put on social media for, people to give you advice.
And and thank you, by the way. I don't remember what you actually said to me. I don't remember that. What I do remember is that after I talked to you, like I felt like I was going to be okay.
Good. That's what I wanted you to feel.
Like it resolved in the moment, while the situation couldn't be resolved. And there's still some, it's not like it just makes everything go away.
Right. It doesn't it's not a magic pill.
But the kind of feelings running through your body of like escalation and all of that. Like I do remember, I don't remember what you said, but I do remember that like you had some sound like re-perspective. Um that that I was like, okay, I'm gonna be okay. I can keep breathing.
I can keep breathing and I can keep moving on.
Yeah. And I just probably need to sleep on this. Hmm. Yeah. Look, you go away on vacation and then I'm like, I need you.
I'm just glad you did it when I had cell phone reception, because there were parts of our trip where I did not have reception. And then,
I was
could you
very
imagine?
I knew that you weren't yet in Hawaii.
So you're like, still safe time.
Still safe to reach out and let them know what's going on. I also was thinking if I didn't tell Chris about this, he would be like, this kind of big.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you tell me about this? I don't take a vacation from our friendship.
But I did feel a little bit guilty about it.
I'm sorry. I don't want you to feel guilty about that.
Why are you apologizing? Boundary.
Fine, I take it back.
I gotta own my own feelings.
Just because I love a good neuroscience nugget, I just want to throw this in here. And as I have said a couple of times, these are our bodies reacting how they are. And when our nervous system becomes calm, the prefrontal cortex regains control, which is what we want. And in those instances, maybe it's not about dropping complete control, because that may seem too big of a thing in those instances. But maybe just think about loosening the grip a little bit. Or if you're able to remove, a finger from the situation, just one, do that, because that will begin to help you, that's your first step maybe off the merry-go-round that we've been talking about.
Yeah, and I love the analogy, like the word visual that you're painting there with the grip, because when we do grip tighter, it's usually because we feel unsafe. So whether you feel yourself physically gripping tighter, whether you're watching the actions you're taking and going, wow, I'm really like hanging on tight to this. What's the deal? It's a good indicator that there's something going on and that you are trying to control things in order to like create safety.
Yeah.
And that's then a way for you to start digging in and saying, okay, why do I feel unsafe? And oftentimes I think we get taught that, that word micromanage. People say, I'm not a micromanager, because like it does have this like negative connotation, like, oh, you know, you're just mean. You're just a bad person. You're just, all these things, bossy, rigid, intense. And really, like, that's not what this is about. It's not that we're bossy, we're rigid, we're intense. It's that we're scared, we're stressed, we're anxious, and there's something going on. And we, like, aren't aware and not using the tools that we've talked about in order to help, you know, resolve that. And so I think acknowledging this is like literally what it means to be kind to yourself. So if you've been struggling with that, you keep telling me to be kind to myself. What does that mean? This is what I'm talking about. It's reframing, because you're not bossy, you're not rigid, you're not intense, you're not just like a control freak. You're anxious, and you don't have all the tools you need in your toolkit in order to help pull yourself back from that. And by acknowledging that, you're able to then start creating a space where you can intentionally use the tools, put the tools in your toolkit and use those tools to help reduce that anxiety, instead of leaning into this idea that control is going to help you, because it's so fleeting.
It is.
It's so fleeting. So, just some closing questions to think about. What would you change if you trusted yourself more than you trusted the plan?
Going back to your Disney plan.
And I think about this boss that we had once, who I quote a lot because he was just so impactful for me in life. But he said to me, like, I would bet on you any day. Your capacity to learn and figure things out, I bet on you any day. And the days that I feel like I can't trust myself, I respect him, and I know that he thinks I can trust myself, and so I'll lean into that. So what if you just started trusting yourself more than you trusted the plan? And you said, you know what? I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I think I make pretty good decisions and I'll be able to navigate it. And when I get stuck, I have a pretty good network of people who I also trust that I can call and say, I need help. Um, and then where can you loosen just a little bit this next week? So if this is something you're struggling with, start asking yourself, ooh, where can I lift one little finger off
Yeah.
my grip?
Yep. And look, great way to start the week to look into what's happening, and you have the opportunity to not, change it at all. You're just trying to loosen the grip just
Now,
ever so slightly.
pro tip, focus on loosening your own fingers, but don't be pointing out somebody
Right.
else's fingers that you think they should be lifting, because
Exactly.
that's a marriage ender. Like, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure. So, like, don't go pointing out other people's fingers that you feel like are gripped too tightly unless they specifically ask you.
Yep. So share with us. We want to hear from you. Like, what are the things that you have found helps you whenever you are in this heightened state to move back into a place of purposeful choices? Depending on what platform you're listening to us on, you can throw it in the comments. You can reach out to us via email at connect@chrisandjenitm.com, and you can leave a voicemail or text us at 940-278-8129.
Yes, join us. Click subscribe or follow wherever you're listening. Become a part of our community. Go to our website, chrisandjenitm.com, and join us there. We definitely want to be in the community with you. So join us. And until next time, be kind to yourself, to one another, and make it a great week.
Bye, everyone.